Good evening. I'm calling to order the Owen J. Roberts working session on Monday, February 13. The Owen J. Roberts School District Board of Directors utilizes the working session process as a way to consider agenda items as one large committee for the purposes of discussion and debate in full view of the public. Time permitting, the committee chairperson may open the meeting up for public questions on items being discussed by the committee at the time. Our first agenda item is the 2022-2023 Goals and Priorities Update. Dr. Stout.
Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. So if you recall back in October when we finalized the district goals for the 2022-2023 school year, we discussed having a mid-year update on those goals. So the middle of January was the mid-year of the school year, so we thought this working session in February would be a good time to give you an update. Do want to mention a couple things here. First, I know Dr. Soder this evening is going to be talking about our student success goal, but that will also parlay nicely into the student assessment report that is going to be the second part of our meeting tonight. Also, it is mid-year. Some of our goals are measured on the school perception survey, and that's a survey that we do not take until the end of the school year. So obviously we don't have a measurement for those goals yet, but as our cabinet team goes through each of the goals that are in their assigned areas, we'll just provide you an update as to what we've done so far. And then, once we're finished, certainly would be willing to take questions that the board may have. So without further ado, we'll move into the presentation. So Frank, if you can go to the next slide. Just an overview quickly. These are our 5 goals for the year: student well-being, student success, professional development, communication, and infrastructure excellence. Under each one of these, we have priorities, and that's what we'll spend some time talking about here this evening. So with that said, we're going to go into our first goal this evening, which is student success, and I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Soder.
Thank you. So our student success, the priorities when you have this presented, that first slide is actually just summarizing the goal, and I can share that. The overarching goal is ensuring that students are challenged and engaged while providing multiple pathways for student success by broadening opportunities, building support systems, and eliminating barriers. There we go. So, and that second part, eliminating opportunity gaps. And actually, you can move forward to the next slide. Thanks. So the majority of the student success priorities are going to be addressed in our assessment update. So you're actually going to be able to see the data as well as how we are addressing those. And actually, the very last one in here has to do with communication regarding the various pathways that are available to students. And that is actually something that we're going to be hearing about, I want to say next month, Mr. Bentman, regarding the 339 plan. Okay, so, right. So you're going to be hearing about that from the Pupil Services Department. Okay, and then the next one is student well-being.
Check. All right, there we go. Good evening, school board members. I have an update on student well-being goals for mid-year. So the first 3 goals are goals that are specifically focused around the school's perceptions data. So I have 3 goals there for the school perceptions data, and we're still going based off of, obviously, our last data set points were end of last school year, and so we're looking forward to collecting data in May through school perceptions. In fact, we actually have 2 meetings set up. Dr. Stout set up 2 future meetings with school perceptions to work through that progress. But I just wanted to highlight some of the great things that we are doing for our well-being goals. As you can see, we have information up there, but at the different levels, at the elementary, the middle, and the high school levels, we're engaged in different things throughout the district. For example, where we're incorporating self-management and self-awareness and social skills, social emotional learning through the elementary day, specifically during morning meetings as well. We have student-focused school-wide behavior expectations. The principals and teachers do a fantastic job with the students reviewing these expectations each and every day and making sure we take care of each other and respect each other in our school.
Excuse me, Mr. Bentman, we're just going to pause real quickly.
Sure.
And just make sure that we are together on Zoom, because it's a little hard to pay attention. If we can just pause for a moment. Okay, we are going to have it live here in the room on a non-shared computer. If you are at home and still want to access the slides that we are seeing, they are found in the agenda for tonight's meeting. By going to ojrsd.com, you'll be able to find tonight's agenda, and you will see the slides that we are also looking at in the room. They are in the public content on agenda item. On agenda item 2.0, you can see the slides that we will be seeing in the room, and we will see just a local copy here. Correct? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Benton.
Continuing with the student well-being goals, we have 3 school perceptions data will be used for the numerical factor at the end of the year. But lots of great stuff that's happening in the schools at the teacher level, where it really is that's the most important level with the students in each and every classroom, teachers supporting students. But we have at different levels as well. We have some scholastic mental health coaches at the elementary levels to support this process. We have conversations that are happening in lunch bunches with school counselors. We've added more supports specifically for this year. We have an added school counselor at the middle school. No Place for Hate was added to the middle school. And the middle school created a PBIS committee led by 2 of the staff members. And the building is looking to possibly rolling this out in a more formal manner in the future. Middle school actually added a bully report form on their website, speaking to Mr. Stoltzfus. That is going very well, and if bullying reports have been coming in, and there's been open access to that. Elementary schools and the high school have the same option as well. So that data is available to the school team to work with, which will support our students in the long run. At the high school, we have the big MTSS initiative that's happening this year. Which is very thorough and very, for lack of a better word, comprehensive, I think, through that process. And the social and emotional aspect is definitely part of those meetings, not just academic, and supported by the SAP team, which has weekly meetings and provides supports to specific students at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 level. So just kind of a sort of a plethora of activities that are going on throughout the schools. And then we also have kind of, tier 1 stuff like kindness activities and things like that. I did take a little bit of the Safe to Say data. Our Safe to Say information comes through. We get at least one Safe to Say report a week. We've had 20 Safe to Say reports in the district K-12 that focus on bullying. So report on bullying through Safe to Say. 20 of those thus far.
In what time frame?
One more time.
In what time frame?
This school year. That would be August to today. Yep. So if we can go to the next slide. One second here. So this would be the mental health slide, if I'm not mistaken up there. Yes, that is correct. So we, students in 1 through 12 receiving mental health interventions show an increase in success. I'm actually doing something a little differently this year with this. I'm actually tracking on my own, as well as the principals, about 60 students, K-12, for this goal that receive mental health supports. I've created an internal spreadsheet that has data such as academic data, nurses' visits, discipline referrals, absences, also has IEP goal information. So this is helping me kind of substantiate kind of quantitative data through this process. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I will not be sharing any personal information, but I can provide some information in the long run at the end of the year in regards to how those supports are going. Increase attendance rate. A lot of work has been done at this through the office here. We are averaging about 96% at this moment. So the information on the sheet, is that saying right there 96.19? Yep. So that's where we are at right now. We have a lot of year to go. Today didn't help too much, to be honest with you. Question? That's incorrect. Yeah, it's around 96%. So that's a calculation that I was incorrect on. Yep. So we'll see where we are with that at the end of the year with that attendance. But a lot of things have happened in regards to attendance with the attendance secretaries, the principals, and myself. We're becoming more consistent across the district. We have are revamping our letters, our truancy letters, and we'll hopefully go live with those next week, which excited about. We've also used an automatic phone call procedure process that we've changed to throughout the levels for students that are absent. Our new social worker at the high school, Mrs. Gonzalez, has been pinnacle into helping and support our students and our parents, connecting with different types of resources and keeping track of things. We also we have social worker at the elementary levels as well, but a lot of good work is being done to support students. I've also been collaborating with the Judge Hipple, with a kind of new plan at truancy court. So I'm really actually excited to be able to collaborate with the judge and come up with a comprehensive kind of step-by-step process. The last thing we want to do is fine our parents and put a money attachment to things, but I think the plan that he developed in support of my department is going to hopefully turn out pretty well. So I'm excited to get that off and running. So that's the attendance goal, and the school start time.
Brad, I'll talk about that. So obviously we've had a lot of discussions throughout the fall regarding school start times, and you're aware that we had a community forum that was just designated for that topic. We had 2 town halls in the fall where we were getting community feedback on that as well. And then we also had a school start time committee that met, I believe, 3 times this fall as well to gather information. Again, we did not move forward with any changes in the school start time for next year due to the issues that we're having getting additional bus drivers that we would need in order to do it. So again, that's nothing new, but I wanted to share with you that we did have a follow-up meeting with Wake Up and Learn. I know we had a presentation at the January board work session. So the middle school principal and high school principal and our team met with Wake Up and Learn to give that survey to our secondary students sometime in April. So we're still working through the logistics, but we will be offering that survey to our students and our families to gather information on their sleep habits and how it may be impacting them at school.
So my apologies about that number. I used the January data and not the overall school data. So we're sitting around 96.486%. Next slide.
Can we ask questions
Sure.
before we move on? I have some too.
Yeah, on that attendance rate, can you go into a little bit of detail around how it is calculated for sick children? Because I know that if you excuse your child because they're not feeling well, but you don't take them to the doctor, then it's counted differently at the state level. Like it's not counted as a doctor's note excuse. So what do we count in that attendance rate? Do we count the days when a child is just not feeling well enough to come into school? Because clearly we have a more conservative approach post-COVID that we don't want kids in school if they might have something that is contagious. So I'm curious as to how this is calculated.
We just calculate excused and unexcused. So that information is just students that are not there that day, whether they are excused or unexcused for that percentage rate.
But is this only excused only unexcused, or is the attendance rate counting them as not in attendance if they are excused?
It's both. Not there for excused and not there for unexcused. So a
Yeah,
student that,
Mrs. Munson, whether it's an excused or unexcused absence, you're still absent from school that day. So it's calculated as an absence.
Could we get a breakdown of the various elementary schools and high school and middle school eventually?
yeah, I have that right now if you'd like it, or
Okay.
Sure, yeah. So, okay, so I'll give you the average elementary total. So the average elementary total is 97.186. The average high school total is 96.58. This is year to date, by the way, 96.58. And the middle school is 97. So they're, pretty close around each other. January was not the best month. You'll see that. You'll see the ebb and flow of that process. This also counts like, parents taking kids to Disney World and vacations. This is included in that. So all unexcused and excused.
So for the first slide, for the student well-being priorities, well, I guess second, sorry, I apologize, where there's 3, the increased students grade 7 through 12 report a big problem. So for those 3, can you help me understand where you said we use the PACE survey? So is there anything else we're using throughout the year so we can get an idea of how we're doing mid-year in regards to these 3 goals? Because they seem like pretty big goals, and some of them were our top, like where the students were reporting about kids following rules. That was one of the top complaints last year for PACE. So are we following that in any sort of fashion, and can we report back how that's going?
So the data that we're not using the PACE data for this, we're using the school perceptions data. So that was that's the survey that the students will take at the end of the year, 4 through 12. We are not, this year, we do not have any kind of mid-year or quarterly benchmarks. We talked about at the cabinet level the idea of doing a kind of a benchmark. We did a little bit of a benchmark last year with our own kind of a homegrown questions about student well-being, not connected to school perceptions data. I just didn't move forward with that option to provide kind of like almost like a Google sheet. School perceptions is once a year, so we would just have to take that information and create our own forms to capture that data. But that's something that we are not doing. But with that being said, I definitely understand and I see the benefits to doing that, so we can capture it like in real time.
Right, I guess I'm confused why we wouldn't with any 3 of those goals, because how are we supposed to know what we're doing is working? If we don't know it's working, and then we can't improve it until next year if it didn't work. So I guess I kind of struggle with not following these goals throughout the year and having a way to make them measurable, besides one thing at the end of the year. So if we, I mean, I would like to see something to be done in the future, especially to be able to measure and understand if what we put into action is actually affecting our students in a positive way or a negative way.
I appreciate the feedback.
Brad, and following up on that, I think part of what my issue, I guess, and this goes back to actually in the formulation of these goals. When you say, so for all three of these priorities right here, when you say increase students in grades 7 through 12, well, what number, what's our baseline? What are you moving from to get to? That's a piece of data that you can measure. Same thing with increased students in grades 4 through 12, increased students in grades 4 through 12. You keep, and then even on the next slide, students in grades 1 through 12 who receive mental health interventions will show an increase of success. Well, I mean, how many students are currently receiving that? And then what, again, it's getting back to that, what's the baseline and what's the percentage? Similar to what you did with the attendance rate measurements there. So, that way we can actually look at something that is quantifiable to show that there was an increase in those areas which would demonstrate success.
And so we have those numbers. They're not in this update, they're not on this goal sheet, but we have baseline data. They're presented with the goals in the beginning of the year. So we don't have anything mid-year, as Mrs. Sabo talked about, but we do have like what our benchmark is and where we are and where we want to be. Our end goal. I don't have that in front of me. It's over there in my seat there, but it's in the goal document that's on the website.
Okay, so I guess for a mid-year check-in, if we wanted to measure, are we looking at our success rate at this point in the year to show that we are on track to hit that goal by the end of the year? Are the numbers showing that we are on track to hit those benchmarks by the end of the year?
The only way I would be able to tell that if I took the school perceptions questions, created a Google Doc with those exact same questions, have the principals in the buildings, give that to students to see where we're at. That's the only way for me to be able to track that data is to do that, just that. Yeah.
Okay, and is that something that you were planning on doing for the end of the year to measure?
We're going to use the school perception survey that's done in May. So we'll have that data in May, but if we're looking to do, we're in January, or February, sorry. So if we're looking to do that before May, we could create that Google Doc, send it out to the buildings and have the principals capture that information from students for March, maybe March and April, or kind of end of March.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of the issue for me is like, we can't course correct at this point. If we feel that we're not going to be hitting that goal at the end of the year, what are we doing right now to show up? If we come to the springtime and we find we failed in that goal, we missed the mark completely, the year's gone. So wouldn't you rather try to course correct in the middle of the year to try to hit that goal at the end of the year?
It is a good idea, yes. I don't disagree with you. Yes.
Question I had regarding this, do the principals track the numbers of discipline referrals and categorize them? Like if we knew that there was a big uptick in bullying referrals or fight referrals, you wouldn't want to wait till the end of the year to do something about that. So, I mean, even just anecdotally record keeping, the principals could probably tell you what they're seeing more or less of whatever.
In anticipation of your question, Nick, I did get that information from most of the principals. We're seeing, safe to say, we're at about 20. Some of the schools were around 2 to 3 serious bullying reports, whether it was a safe to say or there's a bullying forum online. One elementary school was a little higher, and high school, I believe, was focused on the safe to say information in their data. So the schools do have the discipline referrals. That information is stored in Skyward under that piece to that information. Some of the schools use a Swiss program through PBIS if they're a PBIS school. So that data is available and can be analyzed. The goal was to kind of analyze that at the end of the year. But in hindsight, I understand like the good option of do that earlier.
So if a student goes to a principal or a teacher and complains about bullying, that's actually not tracked because they didn't fill out a safe to say.
No, it is tracked.
Okay.
It is tracked, but sometimes what might be bullying might not be. It might be a mean moment or might be teasing. And we kind of categorize those between teasing, mean moment, and bullying. Those are like the three main categories. School counselors and administration kind of categorize. And when I reached out to them and kind of spoke to some of them or got some information about specific bullying, it seemed to me it was around what it typically would be for a school year at this point.
So that 20 was typical, is what you're saying?
I'd have to go back and look at safe to say. I did not look at safe to say bullying, should have, but I did not go back and look at safe to say bullying for last year, which was 21-22.
I understand what you guys are talking about as far as like, wanting to have some sort of mid-year check-in, but I'm also wondering how labor intensive it is for the students and in class and all this to do these things multiple times per year, and wondering whether or not some of those other data points about like principal, what maybe there's another way to get information about how we're doing that's not surveying the kids over and over again, because I know that just might be difficult for, elementary school teachers especially to be constantly, doing that type of thing. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out as something to consider. Maybe there's other data things that we could investigate.
I don't disagree.
That could be
but-
helpful.
But I will say that this was like the bullying point. I remember it was the #1 reported thing by students. So if we want to know how the students are feeling in their environments at school, they're the best predictors of.
Well, I mean, I guess their bullying reports could be used instead of set the question coming out again in that fashion, but.
I mean, we were a part of setting these goals, so I think the feedback reflects back on us as well, that we need to, when we are setting goals next year, look at what are our measures mid-year. Do we have adequate things to measure by mid-year? Perhaps we can't fix it for this year, but in our future goal setting, we should really look at measures that are taken more than once a year.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I'm sorry that my video is not on. I would agree, and Mrs. DiMarino, you bring up a good point, as far it's something we're looking at as far as assessments go also. You'll see the assessment portion of the program a little bit later, but how much class time are we going to take away in order to do these assessments, whether they be academic, whether they be mental health, so on and so forth. So the principals do have the data in the discipline reports, in the number of counseling referrals. So they do have that data, but do we want to take additional class time for additional assessments, whether they be mental health or academic data? And so those are questions that we're discussing right now. But I would agree, if the board would like that type of mid-year data on particularly some of these areas that are tied to the school perceptions, then we would have to develop a separate survey to be given out throughout the school year as well.
Could you remind me again, we talked about this before, but I can't pull the answer up right now. That school perception survey, how long does it take kids to complete that?
Not long. I would say anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes, some shorter. It's rather quick. We give a whole class period to take it at the level, so.
Well, maybe consider, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what might be an answer. Maybe consider just taking the top 1 or 2, concerns or things that were dramatic and focus on those and ask those questions again mid-year, instead of the entire thing again, 30 minutes of time. Just a thought.
Appreciate your feedback.
Looks like we're up to infrastructure excellence. The infrastructure excellence goals are really around our capital planning priorities, budget development, and diversifying staff to create a more inclusive and diverse learning environment. Some of the priorities that have already been accomplished, the high school library is started. I mean, the bid was awarded, it will be started in June. So we're on target there. The installation of the security improvements in the stadium Wi-Fi, that project already started. Mike Shelgren gave you an update about that last week. Prioritizing the traffic flow on school campuses. We are going to review the traffic study, not in detail, just highlight the traffic study and the transportation, student transportation reports that were completed, and they are available for the public in the public section of this meeting. Engage an architect firm to assist with the 10-year plan. So we did discuss that at the last meeting, the last Finance and Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting. So we're working with them to really develop a master plan for the school district and scheduling some meetings with townships. Utilize information from the community to inform the 23-24 budget. We did start the budget development process last week, not last month. I feel like we're doing it all year round, but, and the board did adopt a resolution to keep the tax increase below the Act 1 index. We've also scheduled several additional standalone finance committee meetings throughout this spring, February, March, and April. And we're also going to be including that as, I believe, a topic on one of the town hall meetings as well, just to continue to receive public feedback on the budget.
Can I ask a question about so we have a town hall meeting scheduled for March 9th on the budget. But prior to that, are we going to get an update on, say, a more detailed update on the budget, like staff projections, departmental budgets, so that we're not in public before we get to say, can we put that off for a year? Can we tighten our belts here? Among ourselves, an update.
Sure.
Department.
That's a good question, and I can make sure you have whatever you need to feel comfortable. We, right now, at the early March meeting, we will be presenting all of the individual cost center budgets to you.
We do have a finance meeting on March 6th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, so you will have all the cost center budgets, and you'll have an updated
Thank you.
line
I
item
wasn't
budget.
sure what that meaning was for.
And staffing would be the following week then,
Okay.
at the next working session. So March is a big budget month. And then the last item regarding diversification of staff, this is really Kristen's, but I'm happy to share it out. They're continuing exploring opportunities to attract qualified candidates with diverse experiences. They have met with dozens of prospective employees via job fairs, multi-state job fairs. They're doing lunch and learn events. Kristen's also working with a company, VidCruiter, and developing tools and opportunities to recruit for recruitment purposes. And the Chester County IU, the next thing coming up is the countywide recruitment campaign that all of the HR directors are working on collaboratively right now for recruitment. Thank you.
So our next goal area is the professional development, and this has a focus, of course, with our professional staff. So our first priority with this is developing the universal by design learning, and we have teams in place in each of our buildings, and the training for those teams has started. So we began that in October, and just depending on elementary, middle, or high school, they have had 2 or 3 trainings so far. I'm trying to think, like we have one coming up this week. I'm going to let Mr. Bentman talk about the next priority regarding the University of Pennsylvania Mental Health Consortium.
So an update on that, we had our 4th session on Friday at UPenn. The sessions are going very well. The team is getting some pretty good information, learning, professional development, information countywide, which has been not only beneficial as we kind of create our strategic plan, but is allowing the team to think about different directions. So we are in the process developing the strategic plan. It's in draft form right now, kind of early to mid stages of the draft form. Some of the things that we've done so far was we've inventoried mental health supports in the 7 buildings. We created a kind of a welcome message to really set the tone for our strategic plan. We have some subcommittees going on at different levels, so high school, middle school, and elementary subcommittees based off of their needs and what's to come. We are investigating universal checks at the Tier 1 level, similar to what is used in PBIS with our kind of screening tool. So we are looking into possibly implementing some tools next year, maybe at the student level and then at the teacher level as well. That'll help as we take a look at MTSS K-12. Also with Linkit, we're able to get information into that to create a whole picture for the child, not just the academic side of things. So something that's could be exciting. We're also working on implementing teen mental health first aid for our 10th graders next year, consulting through the IU. So we are kind of leading the pack there at the county level. So as we take a look at that, we're excited to see what that might bring. And then middle school is going to be doing some stuff with their social emotional learning at their kind of advisory time in the beginning. So some good stuff as we collaborate. Any questions on those two items?
And as Mr. Bentman alluded to regarding Linkit, we are on track with that right now. We've had several opportunities for our teachers to be using the data that's in Linkit. We provided training in the early part of the fall, and Dr. Schneider has been leading that in our schools. And we are just finishing the data days that occurred in our elementary schools. That's actually part of what gave us our assessment data that we'll be looking at just a little bit later tonight. Linkit and the team who have been working with that were featured last month for the Chester County Superintendent's Group. Dr. Stout had that group come and visit O&J Roberts and look at what we are currently doing with Linkit. Good feedback from them. For the rest of professional development, the other priorities right now, the curriculum office, of course, has been working on the professional development and the revision of the English language arts curriculum. We had several objectives for that, including getting feedback from parents and faculty to complete the audit for that. We had teams meet throughout the fall to complete that audit. Dr. Monahan participated in PTA or PTO events in every building, and we are reviewing materials and updating the current documents. That's the spring work for that goal. We know that we have started the revision process for the next generation science standards and looking at that also for next year. We have completed the revision process for the K-12 health and physical education courses. Those new documents are on our LibGuide and on the public side of the website. Just two other items regarding those science standards. So new vocabulary for all of us. Those science standards are now science, technology and engineering, and environmental literacy and sustainability. So we've got new vocabulary to get familiar with in the coming years for those next generation science standards. We began the professional development for that for our elementary teachers in August and have been following up with that during faculty meetings. Lastly, we have new requirements for our induction program, and so we are planning the second year requirement for our teachers for next year. That does need to include structured literacy, culturally relevant and sustainable education, and professional ethics. Those are the three topics that are required for that new program.
And those are required by PDE?
They are.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Would you be able to share with us the results of the audit on the ELA curriculum?
So that is what Dr. Monahan had shared with you last month, but if you want that presentation like summarized?
I think I recall, wasn't there only one quote from a parent included in that presentation?
You can ask if you.
So do we have more? I got 2 more since then. Okay, what about the faculty? Okay, thanks.
I have, I guess, more of a comment than a question, but so when I'm looking at the professional development priorities and I'm reading through these, I see 5 training sessions planned, and we've done 2 or whatnot for like UDL and multiple others on here. And the goal is to develop, I'll use UDL, the goal is to develop a core team. I understand we completed 2 sessions. How is that going though? Like, is it being well received? Just because we want to do these and just because we want a core team doesn't mean that it's being received well in some of these areas. And I mean, across the board, we're talking about the mental health ones, we're talking about Link It, like, how are we doing here?
So I would say specifically for UDL, this is going to take some time, but just like really to answer your question, how is it going? This really varies individual teacher to individual teacher. So I can think of people who are part of this core team who are really invested in this and who recognize things that they're currently doing that really hit the mark when it comes to UDL. And I can think of other people who are on that core team who are saying, boy, I'm not really meeting that goal, that target. So it's varied. And so I think it varies by the experience of the teacher, and it varies by, in a lot of ways, the grade level that the teacher currently has. And so this is going to be an individual process for 420 different teachers.
So thank you for that response. So I guess my question is, so if the goal is to, for implementation, if you want to get 5 training sessions in by the end of the year, I understand you'll reach 5 training sessions. Do you feel though we will be able to be where we want to be with the core teams that receive the training sessions by the end of the year?
I think that team is going to be helping us to be planning what the goal will be for next year. And they're going to be at different levels of this. So yes, I do believe that they're going to be further along on that path, but this is going to be a long journey for some and a shorter journey for others.
I have a question on that same goal. Sure. So the goal is really not just to train everybody. The goal is to improve instruction. So is there going to be some kind of checklist so that, like, when you go in and observe a teacher that you know has gone through the training, you know it's been successful?
I think that that's something that our administrative team is actually working on right now, as just sort of those look-fors. Because a lot of UDL is, the language is well supported in the teacher evaluation and in the observation rubrics that we currently use. So I do believe that this is an opportunity for the administrative team to sort of underline some of those places. But again, this is going to be individual for individual teachers. It's just going to take some time on this one.
In regards to the, Mrs. Saber, you talked about the mental health piece as well. Yeah, I feel like that's going really well. I think it's being received very well. We have an amazing group. I mean, I've talked about it before. We have an amazing group of people that are attending. We have staff that are in different areas and working with different types of students or different students and in different areas of the district. I was thinking today, about this presentation, and I was thinking about one thing I might be able to highlight, or my thoughts or my vision. And I think that going into next year with our strategic plan, we need to have a few good things we do really well, right? And if we're going to implement something at each of the levels, and I talked a little bit about those things that we'd like to implement, we just can't throw everything against the wall and see what sticks with this, right? And specifically talking with mental health, it's important that we look, we see what we're using. Is it research-based, and is it something that's going to help our students at the tier 1 level? So I think our team going into it, knowing that we're going to have 1 or 2 things at each of these levels to support the students at tier 1, I'll feel really comfortable with it. So this, my budget's connected to it as well, like the supports and services that Jackie talked about at the last meeting and mental health support. So what we have and how we work with it will determine, what our direction is. But our goal is to really take care of our kids at that kind of classroom level with this initiative. I think moving on to communication, I have the first one. So outreaching to a lot of our student service supports, whether it's special education, whether it's Chapter 504 plans, or whether it's gifted services or ELD, English Language Development Program services, providing kind of a look into how we're doing and what we're doing and where we can make differences or changes with that. So as you know, we've held 2 listening sessions. We were able to get a lot of good information out of those listening sessions, in my opinion. We're working on, and those are just like some examples that I have on the doc there, but some of the things that we are doing to provide support, right? So I want to make sure I'm in the right thing here. Collaborating with different departments, we've continued to meet with the gifted team, continue to meet with the special education supervisors. We're going to take a look at referrals and how we're progressing with those in regards to special education services. We've created a Wildcat Way newsletter that we sent out, an update letter of kind of what's going on. I think we heard a lot about communication through those listening sessions, so that was one thing that we're working on that piece. We also created a new doc that kind of helps parents with students that are just maybe having a identified disability and have an IEP, where they can receive help and support and what avenues to navigate for those sort of services. So there's just a few kind of things I'd like to touch on. Questions about that one? Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Michael.
So a big goal for a lot of what we've been focusing on for our communications goals really centers on engagement and engaging our community, making sure that we are providing content that is information that they seek, information that they've requested to know based on past audits and other town hall meetings and other feedback that we've received. Our underlying goal for a lot of this year, because we're in the benchmarking phase for some of this stuff, is having content that is timely, that is engaging for them. With some of what we focused on, it's making sure that on the website, for example, that they know where they can find certain things, or if they're on social media, ensuring that there's a contact person if we are sharing information. So for kindergarten enrollment, who the contact person for that is. If we have a community event coming up, ensuring that they know how to find more information on that. We've done some subtle things on the website as well, which includes little things such as our quick links, making sure that they are linking to some of the information that is most often sought by parents, so they don't have to go searching for it. If we know and we can track where our audience is heading, we can make it that much easier and convenient for them to find it. We also are looking at some of our things with calendaring is one of the things that we've really focused on for this year as well. So we have a social media calendar, we have an events calendar that we look at to make sure that our information coincides with not just milestones for the school district, but events, national milestones, celebrations, things of that nature. We are continuing to work with our schools and our different departments to make sure that the school district calendar on the website is utilized to its fullest capacity. We're still working with that. Admittedly, that is something that kind of over the pandemic, as certain in-person events were not as common, that fell off a little bit. So we're working on training people to get back into that mindset of populating that one as well. And then one of the other things that we have is going that we've started this year, in case the community isn't aware of it yet, we have community@ojrsd.net. So that means if someone doesn't know the proper contact person or who they should be reaching out to, we can help steer them in that direction. And that email address is monitored all the time. So if someone doesn't have the information, we can make sure that we get them to the right person as well. Next slide. So some of the things that we are doing to make sure that we communicate in a timely manner is really developing some of those resources. So a lot of that is behind the scenes work that includes templates. So that includes things like parent letters, a parent letter archive, so that schools can see what communication has gone out in the past. We work with them to ensure that, whatever the situation is, that we can get that out to the communities. I will tell you, one of the things that we're working on now to take that a step further, for as far as we've come with that, is also to have tools and resources available and support available so that in real time, while a school is working on an incident or responding to something, that we can communicate to staff, to students and parents quicker to ensure that we get ahead of any rumors or misinformation that may be out there. That includes, let's say there is, for example, let's say there is a lockdown due to an investigation in a surrounding community. Rather than just having students on lockdown, staff on lockdown without knowing what's going on, we can tell them it doesn't involve our school. We expect to be out of this as soon as we get the okay from law enforcement, but getting ahead of any rumors or concerns that might be out there as well. We are also working on a pilot program with East Coventry Elementary School for text messaging. That was something that a lot of our parents over the years have expressed an interest in. So we're seeing how that might look before we potentially roll that out district-wide for them. And then we also have templates and graphics that schools can use. So to kind of circle back to one of the topics earlier, there are resources available so that everyone is using the proper logo, that everyone is knowing the context which to use that. It also kind of dovetails into one of the things that we're working on right now, which is with the CCIU, to make sure that we have logos that are in compliance and that we have the entire palette of support files for that. So that's everything from transparent logos to knowing what color red we really should be going with, some of those things to drive consistency. And just to remind the community and the school board, we're not doing a complete revamp on that. We are looking to get as close as we can to the existing logos that are part of our identity while still being in compliance. And then last but certainly not least, we have redeveloped a lot of our electronic tools to enhance what we have going on. So that includes, we have relaunched the Advocate newsletter as a quarterly publication. We're trying to find new ways to make that engaging for our community, because a lot of the information that they're seeing, our social media presence is stronger than it's ever been before. So how do we differentiate that newsletter? So for example, one of the things that we've been rolling out with, we've had some students submitting articles about their experiences on the school campus as well. So that gives the community a chance to really take a look at what our students are doing, what their experience with OJR looks like. We have revamped the website as well. So whereas we had static images before on the website, those images now on the marquee of ojrsd.com will now take visitors to articles, websites, web pages that they need to, announcements, potentially our social media pages if it's an announcement that just came up. With our platforms, we launched YouTube for the district. We've already posted, I think we're up over 20 videos right now that have been viewed as of last check more than 1,500 times. So for our performances, things of that nature. We've relaunched Instagram. That was mothballed for probably about 2 years, and that has had a very strong following and presence since we've reopened that up. We actually have some really promising numbers. I don't want to get too far into the numbers and bore everyone here, but we do have some really cool numbers that I think highlight some of the gains that we're making. So since relaunching the Instagram account in September, we have now had more than 65,500 impressions. That's more than 14,000 per month. So that's people who are taking a look at our content. So just, you might see reach versus impression. Reach is the total number of people who see our content. Impressions are the number of times the content is displayed. So impressions might be higher because if I visit our account 3 times, that would count as 3 impressions, but only a 1 reach. So just to kind of explain that. But we have increased our followers on Instagram more than 50% since we've launched that in September. With our Twitter, we are actually holding surprisingly steady despite some of the uncertainty surrounding that platform. So since the start of the school year, we've had more than 1,500 profile visits, 14,000 impressions. Facebook has seen the biggest jump for what we're doing. So just to give you guys an idea, over the course of this school year, from the start of the school year through January, our reach increased 230%. Our profile visits are up more than 405%. And then if we actually take out the holiday break, where there's a little gap, we have a 300% increase in reach and a 500% increase in profile visits. So that's people who are visiting our page, taking a look at what's going on in our district. And then compared to this time last year, we are up 355% on our reach and 440% plus on our visits. So from this same exact time in 2022, we are up by a factor of 4. So one of the nice things with the tools that we have, we are able to kind of track our audiences as well. So we know which groups are tending to gravitate toward which platform, and we can tailor that message and communications for things that may be of greater interest to them. Any questions?
Can I just ask one quick question? Are we doing anything to specifically communicate to our alumni? Or are we doing anything to engage them more often?
That is definitely one of the priorities that we have moving forward as well. That is an untapped resource that we have. I think we are going to be looking to, through some of our engagement to get their feedback, for example, with the logo. And then I think we're going to see if we can do a campaign for alumni to potentially sign up for updates or where we can share information with them and opportunities for them as well. That's definitely a 2023 second half of the school year goal for us. All right, thank you.
I'd just like to add before we take any other questions, I'd just like to thank the team. Obviously, we have a lot of goals. There's a lot of good work being done in the district. Also, board members, I appreciate your feedback. I think it challenges us a little bit. It's a dilemma that you sometimes find in education. There are many things, such as student performance, that's easily quantifiable, and some other things that aren't. But I appreciate some of the feedback we had today. I know as we've had discussions regarding this mid-year, we really just wanted to focus on the work that we were doing. But when we look to come back at the end of the year with the goals, and we'll have some clear metrics and whether we've met them, whether we've progressed, whether we're progressing in the goal, or whether we did not meet it. So we'll have that at the end of the year. So any other questions for our team?
Nope, I think we're good. Okay. We are going to move on to the Curriculum and Special Education Committee. Mrs. Sabo?
I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Soder.
Okay. So this time of year, we do ask our committee to take a look at our 3 summer programs. And so part of the reason for this is so that we can continue planning them. These have a budget that is presented to you in March and then approved later in the spring, but we do need the spring for planning. The 3 programs are our Jumpstart program. That is for students who are currently receiving reading or mathematics support at the elementary level. This is an opportunity for those students to come in for 2 weeks in the summer, get a little jump start for the coming year. KinderCamp, this offers a 1-week orientation for our youngest students who are starting in our schools. And our summer enrichment, which is either academic or can be our recreational programs. And so again, that we launched that in early March. So if these are appropriate, if I could have a motion to move them on to the full board, we would then include them on February's agenda.
So moved. Is that wait?
May I ask a question? On the 2023 summer academic courses, can you please clarify with online health, will we be offering this summer both the traditional online Health 2 for students who have already taken the online Health or Health 1? And will we also offer the revamped Health class that would be moving forward for our students?
The Health 2 course will be offered this summer. The Health 1 will not be ready until the new year.
Okay.
But students who have started that progression would only need to do the Health 2.
Right. So, but any student who wanted to get a head start on the
Right.
next health, the new health curriculum would have to wait till the next summer or
Or they
the
can
school year.
take it online during the year. That's an option too.
Thank you.
Did I hear a second for that one?
Second.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So moving on, we do have an assessment update for you. And I'm doing this one right, Frank? Okay, just checking. Okay. So a couple of things that we want to talk about before taking a look at all of the data for this. We provided links to the Future Ready Index site as well as our other data sources so that you have the opportunity to really be taking a look at that really at any time. And I say this every year, and I do mean this sincerely. If there is something that you have an interest in and you want some extra time talking about data, just come and let me know, and that's obviously available to our public as well. Typically, families, parents really are just interested in their own children, in which case I would suggest that you contact your child's teacher. But if you're interested in something that's specific or beyond what we shared tonight at the district level, I am happy to have you come and take a look at our data. I do want to show you a little bit on the Future Ready Index site, because if you're not familiar with that, just a very quick sort of tutorial on that. I'm going to be highlighting some of the areas that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. And keep in mind that every school in Pennsylvania has its own page on this site. It's a unique URL for that school. So even though I have this linked for a couple of different places, and I used the high school as an example, you would need to navigate to those different places. So I'm going to be showing you how to do that. So we're going to be bringing it up. And this is the landing page for the high school. This looks similar in all of our schools. Up at the top here, you see those 3 tabs, and I'm on the school performance tab. If you were to look at the school fast facts, that would give you demographic information about the school. District Fast Facts would give you demographic information about our school district, as well as links to any of the schools within our school district. Below that, the State Assessment Measures tab, that's what I'm on right now. The on-track measures, that's going to give you information about attendance and some of the key data points that are specific to the schools. A little less on that for the high school page. But the high school one, you're going to have more information under college and career measures. I just wanted to navigate to that because a little bit later in the presentation, I'll be talking about this rigorous courses of study, and this is where you would find the information about that. The state assessment measures, you're always going to be seeing language arts first, followed by mathematics, followed by science. You'll have the years that are listed there, and any of these places where you see this chart icon, you can click on that and you can see previous year's data for that. And as well, any of the places where you see the student group breakdown, that's where you can see the subgroups that are reported at the federal level. And you'll see for us, in some instances, we don't have a large enough population in a specific subgroup, and so that's why you'll see that insufficient data category. And again, that's just down here on the bottom section for our data. And when you open this site the very first time, you'll have a notice, and the reason you're not seeing it right now is I'm on this site all the time. So you'll see a notice from the Department of Education reminding you about some of the anomalies in the data for this year that are caused by the students not having tested in 2020. And I realize you're thinking, well, it's 2023, we're well past that. But remember, for the high school, the Keystone test data is The students take that test at the time that they finish that course, and then their score is banked until they graduate. So you are seeing data that's over the course of several years, and so that's why you're going to see differences in this data compared to other years or in other schools, because it will depend on when the students take that test. And so that announcement from PDE is really cautioning the public, cautioning families. It's best not to do a whole lot of comparisons here because you are missing cohorts of data and it will vary by school. So just as an example, we talked about this last year when we were discussing the data. Last year, we saw a really low score for ELA because the students, when they were in 10th grade and would have tested in literature, were exempt. And so you had a very small number of students who were contributing to our score. So you can see we have a much higher score, something more typical that we would see for ELA. But our math and our science are impacted, in this case, by 9th grade students. So if the student was in 9th grade and took algebra, their score is not included in our math data. Similarly, if the student in 9th grade was taking honors biology, they're not included in our science score. So for that reason, we're going to have perhaps a slightly elevated math score this year and a lower science score this year. After this year, science and language arts will be leveled out. We will have all of the students who are taking those tests contribute to the data. We will have differences in our math data until 2026. And that's based on when our students can take Algebra 1. And so we have many students who do that in grade 8, many students who do this in grade 7, and a few who do this in grade 6. So it's going to be years out before those scores are counted or not counted on our Future Ready site. So before I go back to our slides, does anybody have questions or anything that you want me to navigate to before I move on? We're good? Okay. Okay. So as I discussed, the Future Ready Index does not include that 9th grade cohort, which is going to make things a little bit different for us, specifically in biology and potentially also in our math. We know that that's going to impact our math for several years to come. I showed you on the site where you can see our increase in that participation in advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and dual enrollment. That's under that rigorous courses of study. And so we went from 30% to 56%. And really what that's showing us is that during those COVID years, a lot of our students did not complete or did not choose to take the advanced placement courses. And so we are seeing more increased enrollment in those courses. We're very pleased that the students are getting back to taking those classes. We talked already about the increased proficiency in the literature keystone. Big change from last year, because last year you didn't have all the students testing. This year you do. Some differences in when you're looking at that data and you look at middle school, you're going to see that effect of that 8th grade PSSA. Be cautious if you compare our middle school to another middle school in the county. Remember that on the Future Ready Index site, you are seeing the full aggregate data from that school. So we have a 7-8 building. Other schools in the county have a 6-7-8 building. So you're seeing all of those scores. The only way you can tease that out is to look on PDE's site and look at an individual grade level. So just be cautious when you're looking at that. We are right in the middle when it comes to the county when I do look at our 7th and our 8th grade separately. Math is also a huge topic of interest for us for the growth data, because this is something that, despite making a lot of changes in our math program, we're not seeing a change in our growth data. The PVOS scores, remember, come directly from the PVOS test. It's not a different test, it's the same test. But we really have no diagnostic for growth on PSSA that is just taken from that individual day. In my conversations with others in the county, what I have learned is the more students who are taking the Keystone test in middle school, the more times you're going to see the data for that growth be what we have. The students will have a higher proficiency rate on Keystone than on PSSA, and they'll have a lower growth rate on PSSA. And that Keystone growth doesn't show up until high school when it's reported out for our students in 11th grade. So while we're not pleased with the scores that we're seeing for our growth for middle level math, this is indicative of what we're seeing across the state when you have a large number of students who are taking the Keystone in grade 7 or 8, which is exactly what we have. I also learned that countywide, we have perhaps the greatest opportunity for our students to take that class. There are, in other school districts, they limit the number of students who can take Algebra 1 in middle school. We are on the more permissive side of that continuum from my conversations with others in the district.
So Kathy, just before we move on, so a parent shouldn't be alarmed opening the middle school page and seeing all that red.
I mean, the growth data has been this way for some time. And when we had our consultation this year with the PVOS team, I talked about this, that despite making changes, and so the consultant asked, what changes have you done? And I said, well, we did a full audit to be sure that our students are actually having courses that are addressing the standards. And I said, we've also taken a look at the topics that are on the 8th grade PSSA test that are not part of the Keystone test, and providing opportunities for our teachers to be reviewing them. It's less time, but that is something that is included for those students, whether they're taking that in 6th, 7th, or in 8th grade, if they're taking that algebra course. We have looked at increasing the amount of time. So some of our students, of course, are in mathematics every day, and some students have an additional period of mathematics. They're taking a lab in addition to their regular math class. So we've increased the amount of time for some of our students and provide more support for them in a smaller setting. And the consultant was very pleased with that. She said, well, those are the things that we would have been recommending to you. But this is unfortunately according to the consultant, a very common pattern across the state when you have a large number of students who are accessing the higher level math. Anecdotally, we also have more opt-outs at the middle school level. Families who will make the choice and say, my child is already taking the Keystone test, we're going to opt out of PSSA. The Keystone test is required for them for graduation, whereas the PSSA is not. So we do tend to have more opt-outs for that test compared to other grades.
Thank you.
Is there a way that I'm sorry, that we could know whether our students that are not taking Keystones in 7th and 8th grade, what their growth is like, separate from those students that are maybe skewing this by focusing on Keystone testing?
I don't know that we would be able to tease out growth data in PVOS the same way that you can achievement data in PSSA. You can look at the predicted score for an individual student, and you might be able to do a group, but I don't know that you would be able to do that by their test. I'd have to look into that for you to answer that.
I just thought that might be interesting to note, so that, because obviously what we're ultimately looking at is whether our courses are helping students achieve what they need to achieve, and if they don't need a Keystone test, are they growing? Is their growth appropriate?
I was just curious when I was looking at the high school data, especially for math, and I pulled up like the students with disabilities. It shows a downward trend for the last 5 years. Just curious if we have a reason behind that or what we know about that. It's 20, I mean, we have 20, based on like what this is saying, special education, we have 22.3% in the high school. And it's continued downward trend in math, in growth and in, is it from not taking them? Is it from?
You could, I mean, I wouldn't really be able to predict that for you. You would have, let me think about this. You would potentially have fewer students who have an IEP, so fewer students in that subgroup on this year's data. Because when I think about the 9th grade group, the number of students in that cohort who would have an IEP would be more than, for example, students in 6th or 7th grade who are taking that test in the same year, just based on when the student would be taking the test. So you could have fewer students who have an IEP who would have taken that test, or not, I guess not taken that test in 2020. That's possible.
Well, I'm looking at this. This is academic year 2018 to 2019, and then it goes from 47.6% proficient or advanced, and this is for students with disabilities, to now, which is 29.8%. And I mean, we decreased from last year.
I would expect you to decrease from last year because you have fewer students who would have tested when they were in 9th grade. You're going to have a fairly large number who have an IEP or a specific math goal who are taking Algebra 1 in grade 9 and in grade 10, compared with the year before when you have everybody in there. Okay? So when I think about the overall group who didn't take this test, it's not going to be your stronger math students. Those students would have taken this in middle school. And so we're going to be missing that data next year, the following year, and the following year. This year, you're missing the group. Last year, we were missing the group in 10th grade. This year, you're missing the group who would have tested in 9th grade. So any 9th grader taking Algebra 1, finishing for that Keystone, who had an IEP is not in that data. They were exempt. And you would probably have a larger number of them in that 9th grade group compared with the same number of students in 6th, 7th, or 8th. Does that make sense? You had a question.
I was just wondering why we have more opt-outs than other districts.
Oh, I can't tell you that you have more from other districts.
Oh, okay.
I could say that you have more in that grade level within O&J Roberts. We have more in that grade level compared to our other grade levels. I really can't tell you for the rest of the county.
Do we know why there's more opt-outs?
Because it's a lot of testing for 8th grade. So those 8th grade students are taking a PSSA in English Language Arts, in mathematics, in science, and potentially a Keystone. And so if you have a child who took the Keystone, for example, in 7th grade, and now they're looking at an 8th grade math test, and the parent is saying, you've satisfied your high school requirement, not sure this one's particularly meaningful for you, and you're already having, 2 weeks worth of testing, it's a somewhat common request for parents.
And so if a student opts out of the test, what are they doing while the rest of the students are testing?
They're working independently, like they are probably in the cafeteria working independently, or in that case, some of those parents are probably bringing them to school later.
I see. Is it due to like student stress? Is it just like, I never understood, like, I know like when my kids were doing all this testing, sometimes they would say, oh, I'm so stressed, I have to take this PSSA or, whatever, Keystone test. And I was like, guys, it's fine, just go, do your best. It doesn't, I would tell them, it doesn't matter. Just go and do your best. It doesn't affect your grade. Nobody's, you know what I mean? And so like, and they were like, oh, really? I could just, yeah. So I'm like, it's fine. and that relaxed them. So maybe there's like an education component there that we have to talk to our parents a little bit more about that. I don't know.
But you
Well,
want good results.
Well, I mean,
So you don't want the
but
principals.
it's not that, I know it matters to us as a district, but like the individual student, like we shouldn't be pressuring our students to perform at like some super high level on this test. Am I wrong about that?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. I actually.
And like maybe
think-
we could sell it better
I-
that way.
But I also think that for some families, it might not really be a stress factor as much as it is, I've satisfied this requirement. Why does my child need to do this right now? It's kind of like the ultimate, don't worry about it.
Well, and I think it's valid to question the testing schedule at the state level, and are they aware of how many tests are building up on the same year, and can we perhaps open the conversation in that direction, because the students should not be suffering from bad planning on the part of the Pennsylvania State Board that's arranging the testing, in my opinion.
Dr. Stout and I have talked about this at length, that it would really be helpful for our middle level students if they only had to do one or the other.
Well, I think this is extraordinarily telling too, because, we want to tell our kids, don't worry about this, but here we are poring over these numbers, discussing why they're not right or why they are right or what do we need to do. I think so teachers want to have a good result. So I'm sure that they don't put pressure on their kids, but I'm sure the kids are well aware of what that something is at stake here. And, even though we are trying to talk to each other about, okay, let's get under, let's not go crazy about all these numbers. We do know that we're all looking at these numbers meticulously.
But I think like these results are more of like an indicator, not about the individual result of the child, right? Am I wrong about that? It's an indicator of how we're doing, of how we're teaching
Sure.
the curricula, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
It's not about, Johnny got a 650 on it or whatever.
So remember that the keystones are one path for graduation. So if a student completes the 3 keystones and is proficient on them, then the student has met the graduation requirement, that assessment graduation requirement. And if they're not successful, they can retest or they can go down one of the other 4 paths. But nonetheless, the students need to test for federal accountability and now for a graduation requirement. So that keystone it's a heavier lift now. It's a little more important for that student, because if they're not successful on that test, they're going to need to have a different set of requirements for graduating. It's a little tougher now. Okay, so this next slide really just has the links to the other buildings. You can take a look at that. Our elementary schools continue to be very strong. The schools all met either the proficiency level or the state goal for 2030 in all 3 of their subject areas. You'd be able to see some more of the data in our annual report, put the page numbers down in there for you. And if you're really interested and you take a look at the results on the PDE site, you might want to contact me just so I can better direct you there. But that is actually where I take a look at the individual grade levels, because remember, what's on Future Ready is aggregate for the building. Wanted to let you know some of the things that we have done with those standardized test results. Again, very specific interventions based on our 3rd grade scores. So this was something that you're going to see in our interim data for grade 4. There's a big effort for that for our language arts, because for some of our schools, the 3rd grade reading was lower than the previous year. We've already talked about a number of things that we've done for that middle level mathematics and not meeting that growth standard. Most specifically, really making use of our available ESSERS funding and actually put more support in the middle school. Even, I want to say, right before the winter holiday, added another intervention group for them. We're making use of those teachers on special assignment this year for our elementary intervention groups. And of course, making use of Linkit, that assessment and data to plan our next steps. And you'll be seeing those new scores, or our mid-year data. Wanted to remind you of what the ELA goal was. So we're looking at 2 different assessments, our Faunus and Pinnell benchmark assessment, as well as Linkit. And so what our goals are for this, and where we are as far as our overall progress. So we're looking at either 85% at that benchmark or 90% growth, or 85% at the benchmark and 75% growth for Linkit. So basically 57% of the students are at or above that benchmark. So we're not to 85 yet, but remember that that's for the spring assessment. A little higher on our growth for those benchmarks, as you can see. And then for Linkit, 70% who have shown that expected growth based on October to January. We're looking for that to also come up. 88% for growth from October to January for our Faunus and Pinnell. And you can see the data. This is the Faunus and Pinnell. And so you're looking in most cases for the students to move 2 levels on that assessment for grade 1 and 1 level for grades 2 through 6. You can see where we are as far as students who are at benchmark, the percent at benchmark now, and the percent who have made growth from fall to winter. And then this ELA also with our Linkit data. Have a little concern there with 4th grade. You can see that we put some things in place specifically for 4th grade to address that. And they actually had a lower score in grade 3 than the previous year. Pretty good growth. Current action steps, data meetings, as I said, those have occurred for our elementary buildings. We're looking for time during the day for teachers to meet and plan their classroom interventions based on the Linkit data. We have looked at the Linkit assessment and where we can provide more practice in IXL. So remember, IXL is that software where students can get additional practice on specific skills, what they need to work on. And then, of course, at the middle school level, we added additional supports to that what I need, their WIN period. So remember, some of our schools use WIN and some of our schools use tier time, same kind of thing, interventions for students, small group interventions. We took a look at the working with our ISTs and our coaches for the specific grade level needs and assessing those areas for any potential skill gaps. That's really an ongoing process. Adjusted the tier criteria at the elementary to include needs in phonics. So that was actually a request from our faculty. And we have case studies. So this is when the team meets, so this might be the IST, the classroom teacher, potentially a special education teacher, and Dr. Monahan for looking at specific student profiles in reading and planning what the intervention might need to be for a specific student. So we do that when we have challenges for what's the right program. We kind of bring the whole team together for what can be useful for an individual student. Mathematics, we have, of course, goals for mathematics. Similarly, these are set for our April benchmark, but you can see what those goals are. Progress toward them, again, this is 90% at benchmark and 75 growth for that Linkit assessment. So depending on the grade level, anywhere from 40% of the students are where they need to be for the benchmark for January, but remember our goal is for the spring assessment. They're higher in growth rate now. 73% of them have made growth from October to January. Linkit benchmark data, again, you're looking for them to be advancing. This is the same test, but this is the on-level test for the students. You can see some places where we've got backward movement. This is part of the reason why we've got those small group interventions, especially in our in the middle school, and you can see where the focus would be for our elementaries. And you can see we've got better growth there. Action steps for mathematics, again, you're seeing those data meetings that's developing those tier groups that we talked about already for ELA, that's done at the same meeting. Providing time for our teams to plan and meet their classroom interventions, aligning the Linkit assessment to the practice that is available in IXL for our grades 2 through 8. We talked already about using that win time at the middle level and working with our teachers for that multi-tiered system of support, that MTSS process, to take a look at specific grade level needs that's going on in our schools. Lastly, science assessment action steps. So our science benchmarking was done in November, so they have not had that second assessment yet, but this is the work that we have done in the fall. Item analysis for the fall Linkit results for all of the teachers for the areas where they have that science assessment, that's grade 4, 8, and high school biology. Taking a look at the PVOS data for our students and looking at the projections. So this is where are the students who are projected to be proficient for advanced, students who are not projected to be proficient. So you're kind of looking at how to assist those students. This analysis includes both remediation and enrichment activities for students at that advanced level. And then we know that they're going to be doing that winter benchmark a little bit later this month. So we'll be able to send that data out to you or update this slide at a later time. Any questions?
Just for the data that we were looking at for ELA and for math, does that include students who have IEPs or special needs?
It's all students, yep, for
Okay.
each grade level, yes.
So for the Linkit benchmark on ELA, it looks like we had some students that went backwards in there as well. So it looks like grade 4, 6 stayed the same, grade 7 went backwards, and there was minimal growth in some of the other ones. So is that a concern? I mean, in terms of looking at percent proficient and advanced versus percent making expected growth, I mean, I know you're saying that the growth is up, but what do you give more weight to when you're looking at these assessments?
You want the students at benchmark whenever they're taking the test. That is really what you are wanting the students to achieve. Growth, of course, is, you know, we're looking at that too, but you're really wanting those students to be at benchmark. So if you have a group of students who is not at benchmark, this is the group who you're going to be providing intervention with. So think about how this process works. Students have a fall assessment, and then you develop those tier groups for the students who need assistance, and they're in that group until you assess again. So we've just done that second assessment. So do we have students who now need to move into an intervention group? Do we have students who need to move out of that? That's that whole placement of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and the like. So you're going to be doing a lot of movement after those data meetings. One of the other things, and I know that you're specifically talking about ELA, but one of the things that we noticed for the mathematics Linkit was right after the assessment had been given was the content for the area where the students had scored the lowest in among the skills. So some of this is the progression that you are teaching this and where you're going to place that assessment. So we wanted to have this data for you. This is when we're planning to do this, but we were thinking, boy, we probably could have waited 1 week for the math assessment and been able to assess the students right after they had the instruction on the area where they had the lowest skill set.
And that's a learning curve with Linkit that we can overcome
Yeah.
in the future.
Yeah. But to answer your question, you're always going to be looking at the students who are not meeting benchmark, because you're going to be providing intervention for that group of students or that individual student.
And as a percentage, do you know what percentage of students are currently receiving those interventions?
We have that data. I was going to be putting that in Boardline this week. I don't have that right in front of me. Do you want to answer that one? Because we did pull that.
West Vincent at 9%.
Okay. So I'm just trying to think through those numbers. So how does that, I guess I'm always looking for ways to compare us to how other districts are doing. I mean, it might be, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but I mean, there's got to be some other way to measure where we are right now. I mean, is that good? Is that bad? Is that average? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, those percentages. I imagine we're working towards decreasing those percentages, correct?
So typically in an RTI or MTSS model, you want at least 80% of your students proficient or benchmark in the core curriculum. About 15%, 15 to 20% could be tier 2, and 5 to 10% could be tier 3. That's a typical model in the research around response to intervention, which falls under the MTSS model.
Okay. Are you going to send that to us? I'm much more of a visual person. Yeah.
I actually was just waiting for one school, and I got it over the weekend, and it's sorry.
We'll put it in board line.
We will have that in board line.
Do you have enough data to do cohort tracking? Like what was the percentage in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, so that you can say, are we seeing progress, steady progress, or are the same kids in this group as they go through the subsequent years?
You would be able to do that for our interim data. You certainly can do that for PSSA. You would be able to do that for Fountas and Pinnell because that's an assessment that we've used for several years.
Right.
Wouldn't be able to do that with Linkit because this is our first year using that assessment. But you could look at that a cohort from Fountas and Pinnell would be a bit easier for PSSA, but you could look at it with our interim data.
It would probably be interesting to track to see if is the program working on making.
Right.
these
I mean, our
decisions.
focus is every year, all of those individual students. So, you know, you're going to work with them where they are, but I certainly understand your point with it. Yeah.
So we set the at Fountas and Pinnell benchmark goals for this data based on historical performance of our students. So it is already based on that historical information.
And remember, you're seeking this for the spring benchmark. So they haven't had all the instruction yet.
So I'd be curious when the tier 2 and 3, is this like since we've had this information and now we've already moved the kids to the tiers if they needed to? So I would be curious to look at, are more kids in tier time mid-year, after our mid-year assessment, than when we first started the year?
I can find that out. This is the data that is required. Our tier 3 data for 3 of our schools is what is our title data. And so that's why I reported consistently across. We're finishing that up and I can find that information out. We typically have better numbers middle and end of year than we do in the beginning of the year.
Okay, yeah, I'd be curious to see the progression would be really great. My other question is, when we're looking at FMP versus Linkit, so a couple of things. One, Linkit, correct me if I'm wrong here, based on how we measure and test the students, we would actually want them at whatever the goal is, 85% at the beginning of the year, correct? And then we'd want them to at least maintain throughout the year in order to, I'm not talking about growth, I'm talking about percent efficient or advanced, because that would be saying at the end of last year, they know what they need to know going into, we'll use 3rd to 4th grade, for example, what they need to know, because the questions that they expect to get right at the beginning of the year is lower than the questions they expect to get at the end of the year, correct?
Are you talking about the FMP or the Linkit? I'm sorry.
Linkit.
For Linkit, our students have never taken the Linkit assessment before, but we would hope, but we also know that there's June, July, and August that occur without us. And,
right.
and so in the fall, we're relying on the fact that they've recalled everything from May and the previous school year. So we'd want them to be at 85%, but we also know that that may not be realistic based on not everyone is, you know, they have different competing priorities in the summer.
But 30, looking at 48 is for beginning of the year when we're at 40s and 50s is would we consider that to be a struggle at the beginning of the year?
So we can actually look at Linkit and see, because they're basing the scores off of other schools in the state who've taken the test at that same time.
Yeah.
So we can we actually can compare ourselves in Linkit to other school districts in Pennsylvania and
Like
their
us.
performance as well.
I
We
would
can do
love to
that.
see that. And then my other question is, from my understanding, Linkit is, so they do this assessment online, correct? Like on a computer, iPad, it's digital. FMP is by a teacher, so it's more subjective, correct?
To an extent, yeah, but it's also done at their reading level, their instructional reading level, whereas a Linkit, if a student isn't on grade level for reading, language arts is the only one that can't be read to them. So they're taking, in some cases, a frustration level test
Got
because
it.
they can't actually read it to answer the question.
So we can't modify Linkit's
We
assessments at all?
cannot. And PSSAs wouldn't allow that anyway, so I wouldn't want to do that on
Even
that
for our
assessment.
kids who are eligible for PASA, they can't?
PASA, I believe we wouldn't be, I don't know if the kids for PASA would be getting a Linkit either, because I don't know if that would be appropriate developmentally.
Okay.
So just to clarify that, so I could be in a 4th grade class and I could be reading on a 6th grade reading level. I'm going to be having that 6th grade Fontes and Pinnell assessment. I could be in that 4th grade class and I could be reading at a 2nd grade level. I'm going to have the Fontes and Pinnell assessment at the 2nd grade level, at my instructional reading level. But for Linkit, I'm going to be taking the 4th grade reading test.
Ryan, I have another question. And I think it's sort of related to the presentation on the assessments, but I went back to the previous presentation on the curriculum revision updates, and I found the slide on the teacher feedback. I'm not looking for an answer on this tonight, but could you provide a summary or at some point in the future an update on how you've addressed the needs that were identified according to the teachers in the district that the curriculum revision needed?
So we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay.
So some of that is, as I said last month, the feedback from the teachers were everywhere from A to Z and in between. And so some of that is identifying professional development trends and what North Coventry teachers might be very different. What they need might be very different from West Vincent teachers. And so my plan is to sit down with those academic coaches, and the middle school and high school is a little easier because it's the department chair and they're in the same building, and looking at that and saying, okay, what is it that we need? Let's plan the professional development that's needed. And so that's where we're at. We're kind of at the place where we found the results, and the reaction to it is, all right, let's plan a course of action specific to each school's area of need. So I'm actually finishing my last whole faculty on Wednesday at East Coventry, providing the summary of the findings from the audit. And so after that is when we'll start planning the next steps.
Okay, so then, just so I have it straight in my head, in terms of a timeline, you're thinking that you would have implemented all of this for the start of the next school year, after you've had your chance to have all the revisions and the professional development with the teachers?
In the reading side, yes, we are looking to separate reading for next year and writing in the subsequent year, because it's a lot to ask teachers to do 2 courses in 1 year. And sometimes people forget that English language arts is more than one subject. So we're going to tackle reading, and we're going to look at the areas of professional development that are needed for reading, address what we can this year, and then plan for those as part of professional development for next year.
If there's no other questions, then we're good.
We can open up to public comment if there is any, online or in person. Okay.
Okay. Fine, Yep. Finance, Buildings, and Ground Committee. Mr. Hermanos?
Good evening, Chairperson Peterson. The Finance, Building, and Grounds Committee would like to present the traffic study report and the student transportation study report. The reports are in the board docs, and Jackie was just going to give a real quick, brief summary of some of the highlights of these reports.
I promise it'll be brief. It'll be brief. Okay, so the purpose, McMahon did a traffic study of our main campus. And many of us live it and experience it every day, so we know many of the issues there. But the purpose was to identify measures to improve access to and from the campus during our, typical arrival and dismissal times. The peak for the district and also the main intersections, Route 123, Route 100 and Cadmus Road in the morning, they all merge onto themselves. It's all at the same time. That's why it's worse in the mornings, really. And then in the afternoon, OJR peak dismissal is before the major intersection peak times for commuter traffic. So just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. The planning recommendations, they begin in section 3. I'm not going to go over all of them. You have them in front of you. They gave us really a toolbox of recommendations. There are 11 options. They range in cost, to low, mid, and high. Many of them are considered infrastructure improvements. And those recommendations, the prioritization of them occur on 3-7, that page. So not surprisingly, the Route 23 issue in the morning is our biggest issue, traffic-wise, and also Cadmus Road. So those two entrances. There are also recommendations for internal traffic flow. So what we are going to do is give this traffic study report to our civil engineers and our architects when they are developing the master plan to help them inform their recommendations and things that are going on for the main campus recommendations. So that is our next step. Was that fast enough, or do you want something?
No,
would you like more? Or do you
great.
want to comment? Because
my only comment, and I'm surprised that they didn't mention it, but they didn't seem to call out the intersection in front of the administration building as an area for improvement.
no, they really didn't. They
And
really
I find
focused.
that
Yeah.
is a major bottleneck in the morning.
I think it's all wrapped up in the recommendations for Route 23. I'm not sure, but they do make some recommendations about moving the middle school drop-off to help pull more traffic onto the main campus. There's lots of recommendations about adding turning lanes, all directions. So, really the key would be to get the traffic off of the roads and onto the campus. But that's a good point. I mean, they really didn't specifically identify that particular intersection.
Right.
And I know you were very involved. I mean, you were very helpful
Yeah.
in your reviews, considering your background. So any questions about the traffic study itself?
Can we ask for them for a comment on that, maybe?
Sure,
Like
yeah.
a follow-up comment?
Sure.
Sorry, my microphone is on. Would any of these recommendations allow for a reduction in the number of security staff required to?
I don't believe so. Some of them actually may require additions.
What's
To be honest.
concern as we're
Yes.
in a time where it
Yes.
is difficult to find employees as necessary, trying to reduce our need to rely on
Right.
humans as part of this process.
That's part of the process.
I mean, just
That's a good point.
anecdotally,
Sure.
I think that we're trying with different signs and arrows that I see and cones, but compliance to those cones and signs is not good. So people see a one-way arrow and they're just like, forget it, I'm going left.
Right, and
I see it every day.
You see it every day, and so
Yeah.
that
And so if you have a
brings-
person there, then they're a little more apt to follow a person waving them as opposed to an arrow.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And there are some recommendations within this study and also with the student transportation study, because they kind of overlap, that are saying, maybe you should have one-way flow of traffic in and out. We would never make that type of a recommendation in the middle of a year after speaking with security about that, because that would be a change in behavior and patterns, and we would want to start something like that at the beginning of a school year. So we will be looking at a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, many of the things that we could potentially do that aren't infrastructure changes. There are some recommendations that we need to get together as an administrative team and with the principals as well, because some of them definitely impact the building schedules. Okay, so I have that one follow-up item on the admin intersection. And then the student transportation efficiency study. Transportation Advisory Services completed that study and report. They did many other schools in the area. I know they did Westchester at one point, Downingtown at another point, and some of the larger schools. So that purpose of that was really to provide a third-party perspective on the efficiency and effectiveness of our student transportation services. Currently, just so we're all on the same page, we do offer a two-tiered system. Secondary and elementary, 7 schools in-house, and approximately 5,400 students. We also serve, and this is where some of our challenges are, as we have been talking about this for a while, 490 other students who are either charter, non-public, private, that attend approximately 70 different schools. And that number does go up and down depending on placements. It also has private placements or special education placements. So that number will go up and down a little bit.
Is that the 490 number, is that the number of children who are eligible or the number that we are actually transporting?
That is the number that we're actually transporting, because parents we ask them to complete a form if they want non-public transportation. Yep, so that's the actual number right now. The executive summary for this report is on page 3-1, and if you want to go right to the meat of the report, it includes both short-term and long-term recommendations, and they really summarize the recommendations in 3 different areas: operational, financial, traffic, bell times, and contract. So do you want me to hit the highlights of those, Mr. Harmanis?
Yeah, sure, hit the highlights.
Okay. For operational and financial, they're recommending that we work closely with other districts in the IU to try to coordinate our out-of-district placements. Our challenge on that is that we are at the northern section of the county. So we're running through, other areas, but they're not really coming through us. But Chris does do that whenever he possibly can. I mean, they work together, especially the districts that are on our borders. Traffic bell times. This is where some of the recommendations are coming in to limit automobiles to one-way flow. Consider dismissing bus riders 10 to 15 minutes before car riders. I know that's a concern for principals because of loss of instructional time. And then this report also does talk about widening Route 23. Yeah, I know Dr. Soder wouldn't like that one, and neither does Mr. Kohler, because I already talked to him about that. Widening Route 23. Here's another one that's probably not overly popular, but you could consider a triple bell schedule.
Yeah, I read that, and that's pretty.
I know. It's major revamping, significant, and it is taking your elementary schools and maybe putting 2 of them on the same bell schedule as your middle school and 3 others on a different bell schedule. So,
Yeah, I think my comment on that one would be, I think the triple bell time, I think there's merit to that, but the way that they've described it is ludicrous.
Gary?
Yeah, 7:15, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, there's 3
Yes.
different start times.
And I really haven't talked to anybody
Yeah.
about that one because,
But I'm wondering if there is some merit to having a triple bell schedule that's like more compact, where and I think I've mentioned this at some other meetings, where we offset middle school and high school by like 10 or 15 minutes.
Well, I'm wondering about that same question, because the one thing we talked about with transportation over and over again is that we have these buses by the day or whatever, and not, that's where the expense comes, not how many runs they're making. So if you can utilize those buses for a day and make more runs, you can maybe have fewer buses, like it said on there. But no one likes that 715 number, especially for elementary school students. So I'm wondering if there is any merit to that triple, something better that could be done with that. Even if you can't reduce the amount of buses as many, maybe something.
Right, maybe some, though. Like, I understand your point, definitely. And Westchester did go to a triple bell schedule. They do have 2 secondary campuses, though, so it was an easy thing for them to do. And they did that many years ago. But I can speak with Chris Andrews as the consultant on this, and I can maybe probe a little bit more to see what he thinks about that. I can do that.
And did he have any awareness that one of the things that we had talked about was the flipping of the elementary versus high school?
I mean, in his report, he does address that, and he does say, you know, if you're going to flip or if you're going to push, you need to add buses, which we did know that. He's just giving kind of a cost and quantifying it and making a recommendation for current routes to add 2 more buses, which we tried to do, we just couldn't get the drivers for them. So it's a driver struggle all the way around right now for us to
Right, I just thought it
improve.
odd that he kind of, that the recommendation kind of split the elementary schools into before high school and after high school. So if.
I know, and I will say.
If we could have a scenario that showed all of the elementary schools on one side or the other of the high school, that would be, I think, a lot more helpful.
I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, these are, I guess you could call this a toolbox of recommendations too. They're recommendations. We wouldn't necessarily, we have to really vet them and think about how it would impact us. Sure, it will save you a ton of money, but how does it really impact your everyday operations? So, but we can vet that a little bit more to see if there's some way to tweak it, because we do loop in other runs with our, as you know, right, with our actual elementary run, like when secondary is done and then elementary, we may then go pick up another child and take them to a special placement. So we do loop in when we can, but not on a mass scale.
And I did look at this report, but obviously it was very long, so.
I know.
And the one thing I wasn't really sure if I was getting in this with all the numbers was, you know, are there buses that are, because of just geographics, are really running with no kids in them? And then we have these buses that are packed that are going to, you know, Ridgely or whatever. You know, do we have, or are there any ways to utilize the buses better and not have empty buses driving around?
We spoke at length with him about that. The geographical size of our district makes it very difficult, because just to take a bus from the lot and go all the way out, for example, on minimal number of roads, all the way out to, let's just say, East Nant Meal Township, and come back. I mean, it's tough. That's why not all of our buses that are going to the large geography where the kids are spread all out. It's different for places like North Coventry. You have more dense housing, but areas like French Creek and even at some areas of West Vincent, it's hard then to not have the kids riding on the bus for so long. Like, that's the balance. That really is the balance. So, and we know in order to, right now, I think we have 89 students that are picked up prior to 6:30, because I know that's another issue and concern for the board, which is up, it's 3% of our population, but 89 students is still a significant number of students being picked up that early. And really the recommendation is to add buses for that, you know, in order to help minimize that, which you will have some kids, you know, you'll have less kids on buses overall then too.
Buses isn't the problem, it's drivers.
It's drivers,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely, yeah, I know. It, and then they also reviewed the contract, encouraging the use of additional training programs for the drivers, requesting specific reports from GNL, and sharing recruiting and retention practices, which we've done all of that. I'm meeting, well, monthly report, I'm meeting with them tomorrow about that, so. And I think I touched on the items for routing already. Any other questions?
Is there any public comment on this material?
Is there any public
Is there anybody left?
Anyone online? 2? A few people.
All All right, thank you. That's the end of our report.
Okay, we are moving on to legislative and policy. Dr. John?
Okay, well, I
Ready to
just want
go?
to thank the last two remaining people who waited just for this committee. All right, we have 6 items on the agenda tonight, 4 of which are just minor revisions, and 2 are policies that are up for deletion because we are in that consolidation phase. So policy 218.1, student discipline. I believe the wording was changed, or the wording for weapons was changed so that it included chemical agents such as pepper spray and mace and stun guns. Are there any questions about this policy? If not, do I have a motion to move this policy?
Yeah, question.
Oh, okay.
Did you have one question?
I did have a question. I mean, the pepper spray and mace.
Yeah, I
I'm
have
a
a question
little
about
bit
that, too.
confused because
We talked about it
We
not
talked
being a
about
weapon
this,
unless
yeah.
it was deployed.
Sure, and that's the language that's listed. So it's not a weapon unless it's used as a weapon.
So you can possess it in your locker, but you can't be taken out and, yeah.
Is that? Okay, I'm trying
It's in the
to-
definition. It's in the definition. So the term weapon shall include, and then stun gun, et cetera, and then chemical agents such as pepper spray and mace.
Right, so I think that's the problem that we're all running into, is the term weapon shall include, but is not limited to, and that list has been updated from knife and cutting instrument, and we know that students who arrive with knives, are subject to disciplinary action, but having pepper spray in the exact same list, if we don't want disciplinary action taken just for possession, it seems like there should be 2 separate lists. To discriminate between things that are automatically weapons and subject to disciplinary action versus things that could be weapons if deployed.
We just want to move to put that back for further discussion.
Yeah, I think you need
yeah, I
a
think that's
sentence.
Yeah, I think we need.
We don't need to decide on that tonight, I don't think.
Okay,
We
we'll,
just do that.
we'll motion to, we'll just table this and get better wording in different paragraphs. So moving on to the next one, which is a regulation. So it is just for us to acknowledge. And it's regulation 218B, High School Discipline Code. Basically, part of it is talking about examples of things that are under misconduct, which include distributing videos about behavior and also primarily doing anything which is against O&J Roberts school policy. Am I addressing that one correctly?
Yep, so for this, we added 2 bullet points as examples of misconduct. One example is distributing videos depicting any behavior that violates OJR school board policy. So if a child takes a video of something that breaks the policy and the school discipline handbook and then distributes that video, whether it's social media or through text messaging, or however, that child can be disciplined for that behavior.
Okay, go ahead. So for instance, that would include if a child were to film a fight within the building and share that video with their parents, they would be subject to discipline.
That's not, I don't term that distributing, share it with their parents because of a concern. This is sharing via social media or sending to other students within the school building. The child takes a video and shares it to a principal or shares it to an adult, goes to an adult, that very action is not considered distribution.
This might be a, sorry, go ahead, finish.
So I don't know if there's a way to
Define
to
that
define that, you know, or to
distribution, what that means.
They're shutting down facilities
It's
now.
time to go.
Do you want me to define distribution?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so, because I don't want, you know, I want to make sure that, you know, children feel comfortable, you know, don't think they're going to get punished if they are sharing this video with a parent or another adult or a member of staff. Because it wasn't clear to me. I don't know that it would be clear to them. A publication instead of distribution, or is there a different? I don't know.
I'll have to go back to it because I
Yeah,
also
sure.
have to check with legal too,
Right.
moving forward. So, yeah, I'll go back and take a look at distribution.
And does this mean distributing, publishing anytime? Is this at any point? Or is this only when on school grounds? What does, like, when we say distributing, if they take the video but they don't share until later, do you know what I mean? Right, like what, when can,
Right. We often hear a delineation in terms of whether or not the school can be involved in discipline if the action has taken place on school property or after the child has left the building. So I think April's question is if the video is not shared while on property, but is shared while off
Right.
property,
if they put on Facebook or something like that at home, like, is it going, what is that?
because then the action that we're punishing is off. And we're not punishing the action of taking the video, we're punishing the action of sharing it.
Correct.
And when.
Okay, I will get that information and see if I can work the wording and more specifics.
And I'm sorry, one more. When we talk about videos depicting any behavior that violates ONG Roberts School Board policy, are we talking about behaviors only, distributing only behaviors that occur that are taken pictures or videoed on school property? The video itself is of somebody on school property, or are we also talking about an inappropriate video then distributed while on school property, but the video itself is not? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think this is clear, depicting any behavior that violates ONJ Roberts School Board policy. Since we don't have policy of what's happening off of school property, it would only be behavior that happened on school property
Okay.
and videoed on school property. If it was off school property, it doesn't violate our policy because we have no policy for what is
We have a
happening off
couple of,
property.
there are a couple of specific policies that affect like trips that are sponsored by the school.
Right.
Alright.
But that would still violate school board policy.
Exactly, yeah, we clearly define what violates
Right.
school board policy.
I'm just asking because if a very inappropriate video of a student or somebody else is then shared within the building, is there something to say that that's inappropriate?
Say that one more time.
So if there is a very inappropriate video that did not occur on campus, but then is distributed around campus, is there a policy to say that that's inappropriate?
Not here, not in this one.
Well, that would be other unacceptable behavior.
Okay.
There's not a policy or a stipulation for every little thing that occurs. That's why we have kind of some catch-alls within this policy, such as other unacceptable behavior. But I think the reason why we're looking at it is could become increasingly more, will happen more often, and it is definitely something that would be beneficial to have to support students and their well-being. Victims, that is. Yeah. And then recording videos, taking pictures that depict a person in bathrooms and/or lockers. So any type of recording, any videos, pictures that are happen in bathroom or locker room. Questions about that one?
Your comment about the other behavior just triggered in my mind that we're adding these new two after the other behavior and other unacceptable behavior, and maybe we actually should add it before those 2 bullets?
Yep, the order. I
Yeah,
can
so
change it.
that-
I can
so
change that order.
Other is kind of the catch-all at the end,
Yep.
because I think it was maybe originally intended to be that way.
I do appreciate the last bullet saying a person and not calling out specifically students. I think it's important that we recognize that, everyone in the building, teacher, staff, student, has a belief that they should be in private.
My other question would be, that I see this is for high school discipline code. Are we going to apply that to middle school and elementary schools as well?
We can take a look at that. Yeah, there's a middle school policy that we can take a look at and adapt it to fit the needs. I could connect with the middle school, with Mr. Stolzfus,
And this is also a regulation, so the regulations, I don't know that we have to vote on them. Right,
is correct,
yeah,
but we need to get the wording right, so.
yeah.
Can I ask, I'm not on this committee, but can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just about the whole thing about the bathroom videoing. Obviously, we don't want to take videos of people in the bathroom, but we're having issues with people fighting in bathrooms and things like that. If a bystander were to video that and present it to a principal, look, this happened, is that not allowed?
It is allowed, well, no. So no, it's not allowed because the video was taken in the bathroom.
Yeah.
See, the original thought was to do any videoing of anywhere, but there was a concern of what you just said, is that in protection of others and to have evidence, so to speak, for people that want, that feel like it should not happen. So, but we wanted to highlight the bathroom because it is a very private area, and we don't want any videos taken in any type of bathroom situation. There's a fight going on, we would hope that student would find an adult right away to notify them.
Because there still may be other children in the bathroom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But
yep.
that's a concern.
And the taking of the video sometimes encourages the behavior too. So if it's just totally outlawed, well, banned, then we don't have to worry about the little nuances.
Get out of the bathroom. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Brad, can I just add, obviously, we're trying to be responsive to some known issues in our high school of students inappropriately, videotaping certain behaviors and then passing it along. And one of the board members mentioned it encourages it to go in there with your video camera, and it's just not right. It's not proper. We want to be able to educate kids how to properly do it. I struggle with it too. The last thing I think about doing when I come upon a scene is pulling my phone out and videotaping something. But nowadays, that's what kids think about doing first before intervening or helping. It's let's get it on video. So we do need to take a look at some of the wording, but it's our first attempt to try and combat a problem that's not unique to just us, but it's a big problem in schools nowadays.
Any further questions? Moving on to 5.03, policy 221, dress and grooming. Does anyone have any questions about those changes? If not, do I have a motion to move that forward to the first reading? To the full board?
So moved.
And then item 5.04, policy 226, regarding searches of students, student lockers, and student vehicles. Any questions people have thought about reading those policy changes? I think it was just primarily about,
Yeah, the only change
Having-
was adding the handheld metal detector.
yeah. It is a provision, yes.
I'm sorry, is there a reason why it's limited to the principal or assistant principal and not a member of our security officer or our director of security?
Well, I think those are the first people in line to search. If they're not available, then it goes down the chain of, female security officer or, male teacher, or whatever, as long as it's the same sex as the student.
Okay, thank you.
If that's good, do I have a motion to move that forward?
Second.
Okay. Now, the last two items are just, like I had mentioned before, they're deletions of current policies. And this is part of our ongoing consolidation of the various numbered policies. So it's policy 417A and policy 536. We're asking for them to be deleted because they're being found in other policies. Any questions regarding that? If not, do I have a motion to move these two forward for deletion?
So moved.
Second. Not on the committee. I'm committee.
Okay.
You're like, what a-
I think that's, any comment from the two out there? Hear you, yes.
I'm just on springboard policies and virtual weapons. I don't have access.
Yeah, it's different, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in dialogue, it may be helpful to visit what they're already.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one hand raised on Zoom. Heather, if you can state your full name and residence, township of residence.
Sure. Heather McCurry. I had to transfer locations, so I didn't get to ask the question. It was back on the assessment update. I thought when it was said you guys were going to do the assessments that I thought it to understand that we were going to see everything like PSSAs and APs and IBs. So I just only bring that up because I'm not sure how you can go into budget discussions and plannings and teachers and whatnot without knowing how to focus on those areas, especially with the APs and the IBs in the high school.
That data is available on the annual report on pages 18 to 24. So you can actually take the link that's in the presentation to take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? All other hands down? Okay. I call this meeting adjourned.